On May 25, 2009, an emergency call was made to the services in Portland, USA, reporting a fire. When the fire was extinguished and firefighters entered the building, they discovered a horrifying scene. The room was surrounded by crosses and other religious objects, and there lay a completely charred body. However, the most terrifying part was that the corpse was headless. Zoe Saraki was born on March 25, 1991, in Portland, located in Cumberland County, Maine, in the northwestern United States. She grew up with her loving parents, John and Linda Saraki, her older brother Gregory, and two half-sisters from her father's side. Zoe always maintained good relationships with them. John Saraki was a builder, and thanks to his job, he supported the family well. From an early age, Zoe was surrounded by creative stimuli and showed a strong inclination towards art. She also loved animals and had 5 cats at home. As Zoe grew older, she became increasingly restless and curious. The idea of traveling and experiencing other cultures fascinated her. She also started following a vegan diet, consuming only vegetables while avoiding meat and animal products. This lifestyle included an ecological culture of protecting animals, the environment, and health. In 2005, Zoe started attending high school, where she had a large group of friends who described her as a happy, joyful, and positive girl. In 2008, on her 17th birthday, Zoe surprised everyone with a decision that her parents did not like. She dropped out of school. Ken Cunan, the principal of the school Zoe attended, said that the girl refused to talk and discussed why she did not want to finish her junior year. Ken remembered Zoe as very nice, and according to him, her classmates spoke highly of her. He added that she interacted a lot with other energetic and creative young people like herself. A few months after Zoe dropped out of school, she began working at a local bakery and coffee shop named Bagel Works. On March 25, 2009, her 18th birthday, she eagerly awaited getting a tattoo on one of her arms. Zoe had always admired the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt's work, and when it came time to choose a tattoo design, she was inspired by his artistry. Little did she know that this decision, intended to mark her transition into adulthood, would introduce her to someone who would profoundly impact her future. Zoe knew exactly what she wanted on her arm, so she headed to a tattoo parlor in the Old Port area. There, she met Chad Gurney, a 27-year-old tattoo artist. They seemed to connect instantly. A few days after their initial meeting, Zoe agreed to be Chad's girlfriend. The 9-year age difference didn't bother her at all. Chad was indeed a distinctive individual. He attended high school in Wells, Maine, where he made a name for himself as a lacrosse goalie, a sport involving 2 teams using small rubber balls and long-handled sticks. After high school, Chad moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, to study at Liberty University. This institution is well known for being led by the famous evangelist pastor, Jerry Falwell. Chad's body was adorned with numerous tattoos, each telling its own story. His skin featured dozens of drawings, most depicting aliens. One particularly striking piece was a great-toned crocodile. In the realm of tattoos, alien imagery can signify 2 things: a belief in extraterrestrial beings or a reflection of the wearer's sense of individuality, indicating they don't fit into this world but are unique and original. The reptile tattoo symbolized danger and hostility, a predator best avoided. In addition to his love for tattoos, Chad was also passionate about underground and alternative dance forms known as hardcore dance. This genre involves intense and sometimes aggressive movements but requires complete bodily control. It's not about self-harm. It's about releasing energy through various physical expressions like lunges, jumps, and acrobatic stunts that few dared to try. Those who knew Chad mentioned his struggle with recovering from a severe car accident for years prior. Before his move to Portland in 2005, his resilience painted him as both intriguing and complex, a man marked by his past, yet continuously moving forward towards new experiences. Chad suffered significant injuries in Alabama when the Liberty team was on their way to a lacrosse game. A local van carrying both players and coaches was rear-ended by a car and forced into oncoming traffic, where it collided with a large truck. The severe impact ejected Chad from the vehicle, leading to a near loss of his leg and necessitating approximately 20 surgeries. Due to a strong head injury, Chad underwent psychiatric evaluation, which revealed he had cognitive impairments affecting his speech, memory, and mathematical thinking. Chad gained financial independence through the seven-figure sum he received from a lawsuit following the accident. 2 years later, in 2007, he sought treatment for anxiety and depression, eventually being diagnosed with both an organic personality disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). In 2009, Chad traveled alone to Hawaii, with plans to continue exploring the world. This passion for travel and curiosity about other cultures led him to meet Zoe. The couple adopted a relaxed and unconventional approach to their relationship. After they began dating, Zoe and Chad agreed on an open relationship, allowing them to see other people. In May 2009, Chad traveled again, this time for a weekend in Vancouver, Canada. Upon his return to Portland, Zoe admitted that she had been with another man during his absence and allegedly had sexual relations. Initially, it appeared that Chad was untroubled by this incident of infidelity due to their open relationship agreement. However, following this confession, Chad began insisting that Zoe quit her job and join him on a personal spiritual quest in Thailand. She declined his proposal, not suspecting the grave outcome it could have. On May 25, 2009, Zoe visited Chad's apartment. Feeling very tired, she decided to take a nap. While she was asleep, Chad grabbed her by the neck, struck her on the head, and strangled her until she ceased breathing. Then, he engaged in sexual activity with Zoe's lifeless body before decapitating her. According to records, after committing the heinous crime, Chad took a shower, got dressed, and drove to the nearest gas station, where he filled a canister with gasoline. He returned to his apartment, doused Zoe's body on the lower floor with gasoline, and laid a trail to the front door before igniting the fire. Chad took a backpack he had packed for a trip to Thailand, along with a laptop and shotgun. When the apartment caught fire, he went to an ATM, withdrew cash, and checked into the Old Orchard Beach Motel. There, he got into a jacuzzi and waited. Meanwhile, a call was made to 911 emergency services about the fire. Authorities responded immediately and were able to extinguish the flames. Upon entering the building, they were confronted with a horrific scene. Among the ashes lay a charred corpse, surrounded by crosses and other religious items. A neighbor quickly called Chad to inform him that his house had burned down. The young man replied that he wasn't in town, as he had gone to his hometown of Leon, and then quickly hung up the phone. On Tuesday, May 26, Chad spoke with his best friend and confessed that he had killed Zoe. While explaining what happened, he seemed calm and rational. Chad said he was tired of the pain and couldn't restrain himself anymore. As he talked to his friend, he drove through the streets of Portland and carelessly ran a red light. A nearby city police officer stopped him. Chad insisted that his friend explain over the phone to the officer who had pulled him over that Chad had been in an accident in 2005, which might have caused mental health issues. After this interaction with the officer and talking to his friend, Chad went to the police and confessed to Zoe's murder. The police confiscated Chad's belongings, and on his computer's hard drive, a computer crimes investigation began. Investigators found a video recording labeled "Woman Half Decapitated" for suspected infidelity. At least if she cheated, she won't do it again. This evidence was later admitted in court. On Wednesday, May 27th, at the high school where Zoe had studied, her memory was honored with a moment of silence during classes. Teachers and students were informed about the incident during lunch. That same day, a room was set up in the school where social workers and counselors were available for grieving students. After some time, Christine Koo, Zoe's stepsister, made the first statement on behalf of the family. She told local media journalists that she wanted the public to know this was an unusual murder because Chad had committed many evil acts. According to Christine, detectives told her that, in a rage, Chad had attacked Zoe, sexually violated her body, and set it on fire. Then, he calmly went to a motel and got into a jacuzzi. A week after Zoe's murder, on Tuesday, June 2, 2009, a vigil was held in front of the apartment building where Chad had lived. It was a moment of consolation for Zoe's friends and family. Many strangers, shocked and outraged by the brutal crime, also attended. Estimates suggest that over 150 people gathered to pray and remember Zoe. They also placed candles and flowers on the steps of the building where her life was tragically cut short. Zoe's father, John, and her stepsister, Courtney, came to the scene of the tragedy and were touched by the support of so many people. Meanwhile, the police began interviewing Chad's friends. They stated that the young man had a split personality. According to them, he sometimes portrayed himself as a person on a spiritual quest, with religious artifacts throughout his apartment and plans to travel to Thailand to study Eastern religions. Some said that Chad was kind and charming, often giving people small gifts. They mentioned that he often spoke of wanting to use the money he received from the accident for the good of humanity. At the same time, Chad enjoyed his image as a tough guy, with tattoos covering his arms and provocative, confrontational behavior. Robert Collins, a 24-year-old chef, noticed something peculiar about Chad. When Chad attended parties, people often shrugged and turned away. Robert recalled Chad once confiding in him that the only thing he identified with was pain. He even remembered that Chad had this word tattooed on his knuckles. The police and prosecution made significant efforts to gather information about the brutal crime. Deputy Attorney General Bill Stokes reported that the judge had ordered the seizure of court documents. Steve Weir, who rented an apartment from Chad in 2006, was also questioned. He mentioned seeing religious paintings and artifacts in Chad's apartment and said Chad expressed an interest in theology but did not practice it. Watson Atkinson, the owner of another tattoo parlor in Portland, shared that Chad once confessed he wanted to use his accident compensation to find himself. Watson added that Chad seemed overly focused on teenage girls. This concerned him so much that he forbade his 16-year-old daughter from interacting with Chad. Watson also noted that none of Chad's close acquaintances could have imagined how dark his thoughts were. During the initial investigation, Chad's prior medical history and mental health diagnoses were revealed. However, while in custody, several psychologists evaluated Chad and found no evidence of delusions or hallucinations. In conversations with specialists, Chad admitted having strong feelings regarding Zoe's infidelity and expressed disappointment over it. According to court documents, he claimed to be weary of the infidelity of all his girlfriends. These conversations revealed a depressed individual who began contemplating taking Zoe's life after she confessed her unfaithfulness to him. Chad told 3 different psychologists that he engaged in sexual acts with her remains because he believed he had already committed a terrible act and was contemplating what worst thing he could do next. When the trial began, a 127-minute police interrogation conducted 12 hours after the crime was introduced as evidence. Leaked during the interrogation with Detective Danham, Chad said that he and Zoe got along very well. He noted that she occasionally stayed in his apartment for about a week and that they had no arguments. Chad claimed they were soulmates and that she always tried to be honest with him. He stated that he had taken the life of the most beautiful girl he ever knew and added that he owed it to his 18-year-old victim to tell the truth. During the conversation with the detective, Chad remained composed, constantly apologized, and cried several times. Chad recounted that on May 25, 2009, Zoe was napping. She tried to fight for her life and screamed for him to stop. Chad said that when Zoe tried to resist, he hit her on the head and continued to strangle her until she stopped breathing. He then described the atrocities he committed with her body. At this point in the interrogation, Chad stated that he used 3 knives, not a samurai sword as initially thought, for the decapitation. He added that he then placed a cross between her legs and talked about everything he did while her body burned in the apartment. Describing the events, Chad constantly called himself a terrible person. When asked why he decapitated Zoe, he replied that he was trying to turn her death into a ritual of forgiveness. When asked why he did it, Chad struggled to find an answer. He then stated that he felt possessed and that on the day of Zoe's murder, everything in his life dimmed. He explained that, for several hours, he became a wild, primitive beast in his basic instincts, and that's why he committed such a monstrous act. This interrogation became an important piece of evidence presented in Cumberland County Supreme Court. During the initial hearings, prosecutors played the entire 2.5-hour recording for Judge Roland Cole. There was discussion that Chad faced a minimum of 25 years in prison and a maximum of life imprisonment. During one of the hearings in 2011, it was proposed that acknowledging his mental disorder could result in his transfer to a psychiatric center in Austria. It was established that the accused had strangled the victim in a fit of anger. However, it remained uncertain whether Chad, who waived his right to a jury trial, agreed with this. At the time, prosecutors argued that the former Liberty University student and lacrosse champion was fully aware of his actions. They brought in a psychiatrist and psychologist to testify about Chad's mental state, all of whom concluded that the young man knew what he was doing and understood his decision to brutally kill his girlfriend. The defense, however, continued to emphasize Chad's mental health issues, arguing that he was ashamed and afraid of losing control over himself. On January 11, 2012, Chad's attorney tried to convince the Supreme Court to dismiss evidence found on his client's personal computer at the time of arrest. This evidence included a gruesome video where Chad explained how to decapitate an unfaithful woman. The defense contended that this video should not have been admitted into evidence. In March 2012, nearly 3 years after the egregious crime, 30-year-old Chad Gurney was sentenced to 50 years for the murder of Zoe Soraki and 25 years for arson. The judge ordered these sentences to be served consecutively. Chad's lawyers filed an appeal against the sentence, but it was rejected. Zoe's family had hoped for a life sentence. During sentencing, the presiding judge stated it was clear that the defendant did not perceive reality normally. However, the issue was whether he understood his actions were wrong. Sarah Churchill, Chad's attorney, argued before the Supreme Court that brain concussions and other injuries from a 2005 accident left her client in a constant state of delusion. She claimed the judge erred by finding Chad guilty because the search warrant should not have extended to his smartphone, laptop, and social media pages. Churchill argued that, instead of considering evidence from these devices, significant weight should have been given to evidence regarding Chad's psychosis and alienation at the time of the crime. The Deputy Attorney General countered by stating that Chad killed Zoe in retaliation for her infidelity, which he deemed a dishonorable betrayal. The deputy noted that no information from social networks was used against Chad and concluded there was overwhelming evidence proving he knew what he did during the crime. Afterward, Zoe's aunt Kathy Kosov told journalists she felt breathless seeing and hearing him during the trial, recalling her niece's agonizing final moments vividly. Monday, September 14, 2015, was remembered by 16-year-old Nolan Buchanan as the best day of his life. The day before, he had spent Sunday with his girlfriend, a traditional morning mass with his girlfriend's family, followed by a get-together with friends and a wonderfully romantic evening. Waking up on Monday morning next to his favorite girl, the teenager felt like a free, successful, and influential businessman, with the whole world ahead of him. After all, he was now the owner of Buchanan Construction. The young man was going to inherit cars, a house, land, and monetary assets. He made plans for how he would manage the family business alone and certainly do it better than his father, who brought the company to bankruptcy. It would seem, what could go wrong? Already on October 11, 2015, Nolan Keith Buchanan was arrested at Bonita High School in Bonita, California, by the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. Nolan was incarcerated at the Juvenile Treatment Center JTC in South Lake Tahoe until June 13, 2018, when an El Dorado County jury of 7 men and 5 women found Buchanan guilty of 3 charges. The jury took just 2 hours to reach a verdict. The young man was sentenced to 150 years in prison with the possibility of parole from the 25th year of his sentence. This is how his plan to take over the family business ended. Neighbors and classmates spoke of Nolan as a model kid and a good student. As far as I know, he was a good kid, Anita High School student Campbell Ruxton would later say in an interview. He always cared about school, he seemed very kind, he was very nice. I'm even surprised he was arrested. But what really happened in the Buchanan family? Let's break down this horrific case in detail. Molly first met Adam Buchanan when she came to apply for a job at his firm as an office manager. By the time they met, Adam was already divorced and raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage on his own. The cheerful, sociable, and lively blonde immediately attracted the attention of the owner of the company. The interest was mutual. Molly fell in love, started a romance that turned into a serious relationship, and eventually moved in with Adam. Molly dreamed of a real, loving, friendly family and tried to build a wonderful relationship with her stepson. Soon, she became pregnant, and Gavin was born. People who knew the Buchanans claimed that they were a fairly close-knit family of 4. The head of the family, who owned a construction company, earned enough to ensure a comfortable life, and the family even purchased vacation property in El Dorado County, California. A small cabin sat on 19 acres in Greenwood, a rustic cabin with no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. Adam, who worked in construction, took an active role in remodeling the house, and the family began to visit there often. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., members of the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township in western El Dorado County on Highway 193 between Cool and Georgetown. Upon arrival, they found the fire had destroyed 10 acres of the property. A cabin located on the property was still smoldering but had burned to the ground. The fire department personnel observed charred remains in the ashes. The scene of the fire was not touched, and at 11 a.m. firefighters called the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. No one had yet realized what was at the scene. Firefighters were almost certain that the victim of the wildfire was a pet trapped in the house. The arriving coroner was faced with a daunting task. The remains of the house were still smoldering, and there was no way to examine the inside of the house. They had to wait for the flames to finally die down and for the temperature to drop slightly. As the coroner examined the house, he smelled the sweet odor of burnt flesh and later discovered a human skull and a burned chest. It appeared that the tragedy had claimed someone's life. The officer requested backup. Officers from the sheriff's office arrived and conducted a thorough examination of the scene. The conclusion was obvious. The small, secluded, and remote cabin was not the primary residence of its owners. Rather, it was most likely a country cabin where people came to vacation. A Dodge truck and trailer were found on the property adjacent to the cabin. It was possible to run the license plates and find out who the car belonged to. The owner might have been the victim of the wildfire. It didn't take long to find out that the vehicle and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, a company owned by a man named Adam Buchanan. The man in question lived 160 miles from the scene of the accident, about 3 hours away in Bonita, California. This information confirmed the assumption of the police, who decided that the house was just a country residence for those who vacationed there to escape the hustle and bustle of the city. It remained to be seen who was inside, Mr. Buchanan himself or someone else. The name of the owner of the company gave the detectives their first clue, with which they began their investigation. The Bonita police officers were tasked with checking to see if all of Buchanan's family members were well and at home. They went to the correct address and were soon in the Buchanan's driveway, where they noticed a white Ford pickup truck. At a knock on the door, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage came out. He greeted the uniformed officers with surprise and asked what brought them to him. The officers decided to first find out who was in the house so as not to frighten the household. Perhaps the company car had been taken by someone from the company and not the owner himself. Nolan Buchanan said his father, Adam, had gone away for the weekend to his country estate 160 miles away with Molly and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, and they were due back in the evening. According to him, his father had left him to look after the house. Investigators did not yet have sufficient reason to believe the remains in the cabin were those of the Buchanans, but the information received and the discovery of the remains, believed to be those of two people by the evening of September 13th, was enough to report the family missing in the El Dorado County fire. The next day, September 14th, El Dorado County Police went to Nolan's home to talk to him more thoroughly and try to figure out whose lives the fire had claimed. Officers were met by Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They said that their son, the owner of the burned-out cabin, does his own home repairs and therefore travels there very often. The parents were very concerned, as they had not been able to contact their son or daughter-in-law until now. From the story, the officers learned that the house is connected to generators, but at the time of the tragedy, it had no electricity. There were, however, gas cylinders inside. This gave to theories. The fire could have been either accidental or intentional. By September 15th, the fire scene had cooled down, and investigators were finally able to collect evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit. According to Detective James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office, new remains were discovered that changed the direction of the case. Police found a piece of skull with a bullet hole. At that point, we all realized that there was actually a homicide. This was not an accidental fire, reported the sheriff. The remains were collected and sent for forensic DNA testing. In the first set of remains, the bullet was lodged in the victim's thigh. The skull with the bullet hole, judging by its size, belonged to a child. The version of a fatal accident was dismissed. The theory of murder came to the forefront. No one now doubted that the fire was a means of destroying the traces of the crime. It remained to find out under what circumstances the crime had taken place, Was it a burglary that had gone wrong? Or had the family been deliberately targeted, but if so, by whom and why? Or could the crime be related to Buchanan Construction, a company where Adam Buchanan was president and chief operating officer? Did someone harbor a grudge against him due to a working relationship? Initially, investigators focused specifically on the latter theory. They also looked into Molly's life to determine if she had any enemies capable of committing the crime. Once those lines of inquiry stalled, officers turned their attention to problems in Molly and Adam's marriage. There proved to be plenty of them. Investigators learned that over time, Molly and Adam's relationship began to deteriorate, and at the time of the crime, they had been sleeping apart for quite some time. A diary was found in which Molly described abuse from Adam. Witnesses interviewed described rough treatment and abuse. According to them, Adam was rude not only to Molly but also to the children. Molly's mother, Susie Slanker, admitted to investigators, "There were times when I was afraid they would kill each other in one of their arguments." Molly did not sever her relationship with Adam, but would periodically take her son and leave to go to her parents' house, only to return a few days later until the next fight. It also turned out that the couple liked to hunt in the area where their country house was located. Since everyone was armed, the investigators assumed that during another quarrel, one of the spouses grabbed a gun and shot, and when they realized what they had done, took their own life. However, there was an inconsistency. If the tragedy happened because of a conflict between husband and wife, it would mean that near the remains of one of them, the instrument of the crime must necessarily be present. Yet, there was no such evidence. Investigators speculated that the weapon might have been damaged in the fire and may not have looked as obvious as expected. Over the course of 5 days, forensic team members took turns removing ashes from the home. The search was conducted with surgical thoroughness, but did not yield the expected result. No weapons were found in the house. By this time, the data from the forensic examination had arrived. The examination confirmed that the DNA of the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds before the fire, and the angle of the bullet wounds ruled out the theory that someone took their own life. The lack of firearms meant that someone else was in the house, a 4th person who shot the Buchanans. The investigation had to start over. Police had no choice but to turn to the 16-year-old son of the deceased. Nolan told officers that the family drove away in an old Dodge truck. According to Nolan, his father decided to use the company vehicle rather than his personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because he had loaded the truck and trailer with rocks that he was going to use to decorate the area near his country cabin. It was this truck that police found near the burned structure. When asked why Nolan did not go on vacation with his relatives, the young man, as in the first interview, said that he had a duty to look after the house and garden during the absence of his father and stepmother. Nolan also said that they had a neighbor growing forbidden grass on the edge of the Buchanan property, which caused his father to have frequent arguments with this neighbor. Adam often demanded that the neighbor stop planting the grass and threatened to go to the police. Talking about the family business, Nolan told of the company's financial difficulties. Things were not going well. The company was undergoing downsizing, and the number of employees was down to 5. From what his father said, the debts associated with the business were increasing rapidly. So now, the investigation had a lot of useful information, and the detectives had a suspect, a neighbor, especially since, in that area, violent crime was often linked to the cultivation of illegal herbs. Detectives felt that the threat of going to the police could have led to the murder of Buchanan and his family. The problem was, no one had any idea which neighbor they were talking about. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing all the homeowners in a row. The tactic was successful. They found a man who confirmed the story of a quarrel with Adam over growing a forbidden crop. But according to him, after a sharp conversation, the conflict was over. The neighbor had an alibi, and another version turned out to be untenable. What remained to be dealt with was the financial crisis that had hit the family's business. On September 18th, the police visited Adam's company and interviewed the employees. Nolan's words were true. The company was in a sorry state. It was threatened with bankruptcy as the amount of debts exceeded $30,000. Because of this, some employees were fired. It turned out that some of the former employees were extremely dissatisfied with the reduction and therefore could be involved in the crime. That's where investigators got lucky. Over the weekend, the local high school organized a community cleanup day. The students were clearing debris from a business park just a mile from Adam's construction company. It was there, on September 19th, that a small purse with a wallet and identification cards belonging to Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan was found under one of the bushes. A .22 rifle was lying nearby. Detectives immediately went to the scene of the discovery. The county sheriff's office made a new assumption. The perpetrator had massacred the Buchanan family with the found rifle and, covering his tracks, had taken their documents from the crime scene. The discovery was important because it meant that someone had traveled all the way to Greenwood to kill the family and then returned to Bonita to dispose of the bag and murder weapon. It appeared to be a Bonita resident. The proximity of the evidence found to the location of Buchanan Construction strengthened the theory that the boss was massacred by one of the disgruntled employees. Detectives sent the firearm and the bag of documents for examination, requesting a warrant to inspect the company's records and premises. Here, the investigators got lucky a second time. During the search, they gained access to a video surveillance camera installed on the firm's premises. By happy coincidence, the lens of the camera was directed not at the company's territory, but at the center of the parking lot. After this discovery, the case was just days away from being solved. Since it was already known that the family had gone out of town on Friday, investigators reviewed Friday's footage and were surprised to find that Adam had attached a trailer filled with rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had told them. Detectives realized that the young man had deliberately manipulated the investigation. If the white Ford had towed the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the driveway of the Buchanan family home. Investigators re-interviewed Nolan, trying to keep him comfortable while getting as many details as possible about the weekend where he had been and who he had seen. Only this time, they asked him what movie they had seen at the cinema, how he had paid for the shopping at the mall, and how he had paid for dessert on a date. The unsuspecting Nolan answered, with his father's credit card. The officers then applied for a warrant to search Buchanan's home in Bonita, searched the vehicles, and checked financial records. The Ford automobile was still parked in the driveway. It was closely inspected, and they noticed reddish soil sticking to the wheels, similar to that in Greenwood. If the Ford had been used for a trip last weekend or earlier, traces of soil might have remained, but they would not have been as obvious. Unfortunately, the fire had destroyed the wheel tread marks near the country house, but the dirt buildup indicated that the car had probably been to Greenwood recently. Detectives tracked the bank card payments and found that Adam Buchanan had used his credit card on Friday, September 11th, at fast food chain Taco Bell on his way to Greenwood. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed he stayed home, did not go with his parents, and had the credit card in his possession. Detectives went to the diner and checked the security cameras. They saw exactly what they expected, a white Ford instead of a truck. When detectives searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt dated September 11th that included not 3 but 4 drinks. Evidence collected at the scene of the fire similarly pointed to 4 drink cups, so Nolan was in the car. The next credit card transaction took place on Saturday, September 12th, at the Valencia Club bar in Pennon, about 30 minutes away from the cabin. Adam's parents had previously told detectives about the bar. They said their son and daughter-in-law liked to drop in there after renovations to the cabin. Security cameras recorded the time the couple left the bar, and traffic cameras on the highway helped track the couple's route. A Ford F-150 headed toward the Buchanan cabin around 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire, and at 3:30 a.m. drove in the opposite direction. In the first instance, the camera captured Adam and Molly in the vehicle, and in the second, only Nolan. A few hours later, on Sunday morning, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used to pay at 3 of Bonita's establishments, Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed to investigators that Buchanan had only one bank card. The facts contradicted Nolan's stories. By this time, forensic results had come back. Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun. He was arrested right in the middle of a high school class. Nolan Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. He attempted to distort the story and claimed that it was his father who shot the family, after which he pointed a rifle at him. In defending himself, Nolan claimed he took the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolan insisted it was self-defense, attributing the fire and subsequent lie to a state of panic and extreme fright. That's why he took gasoline and set the house on fire, to make it look like nothing had happened there. The defense continually focused the jury's attention on Adam's abuse of his own son and other family members. The medical examiner questioned the verdict because the bullet wound mark on a piece of Gavin's skull was consistent with a shot fired at nearly a 90 angle. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed that his and his brother's beds were next to each other, and they were simultaneously awakened by the noise and screaming. It was at the moment of awakening that Nolan allegedly saw someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin. The shooter then pointed the rifle at him, and Nolan miraculously managed to push the attacker away. Under this scenario, the shot would have been fired at about a 45 angle, which was inconsistent with forensic evidence. The prosecution came to believe that Nolan shot his brother when they were alone in the house while their parents spent time at a bar. After waiting for his father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot them as well. Judging by where the bodies were found, Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Nolan then took the rifle, his parents' papers, doused the bodies with gasoline, and set the house on fire. Then he went home, met his girlfriend, and spent the day with her, creating an alibi for himself. On July 13, 2018, a jury found Nolan guilty. Nolan was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder. As a result, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Judge Kingsbury, in announcing the sentence, reflected on the verbal and physical abuse Nolan faced, on the testimony that Nolan massacred his brother because he didn't want him to go through the same horror or be forced to live with what his father had already managed to do to him. However, as she did so, she also listed facts about the premeditation of the crime and subsequent arson, the creation of alibis, and the plans to run the family business that Nolan had voiced to family members. The judge cited a failure to follow rules and deviant behavior noted by staff at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, where Nolan went after his arrest. Everyone has the opportunity to change, Judge Kingsbury told Nolan. I hope you will do everything in your power to do so. If you behave well, you will have a chance to get out on parole in 25 years under the Senate bill and Supreme Court rulings. It's up to you whether you take that chance or not. Nolan continues to insist he is innocent. If he ever gets out on parole, he will have to pay a huge compensation to the victims. The amount of the payout is unknown at this time. Shafilia Ahmed was born on July 14, 1986, a British Pakistani girl. Shafilia's father, Iftikhar Ahmed, originally hailed from the Gujarat district of Pakistan. At the age of about 20 to 22, Iftikhar moved to Britain for employment. While staying there for a while and during work, Iftikhar fell in love with a foreign girl and married her. Soon, he became a father, but when he returned to Pakistan and informed his family about his marriage, they did not accept it. Then, Iftikhar's family put heavy pressure on him to marry another Pakistani girl. Despite Iftikhar's resistance, he eventually succumbed to his family's insistence and married a Pakistani girl named Farzana. After the marriage, Iftikhar returned to Britain, and after revealing the truth to his first wife, he divorced her. Then, after some time, Iftikhar called his second wife, Farzana, to Britain from Pakistan. After coming to Britain, Iftikhar started living with his wife in the city of Bradford in West Yorkshire. It is here that, on July 14, 1986, Shafilia Ahmed was born. Shortly after Shafilia's birth, the family moved to the town of Warrington in Britain. It was here that Shafilia completed her early education. During this time, 2 more daughters were born into the family, and Iftikhar's family grew larger. Although this family resided in Britain, on holidays, Iftikhar used to take his wife and all his children to Pakistan for a vacation. Now the year had come to 2003, and by then, Shafilia Ahmed had also turned 17 and was studying law. Her dream was to become a lawyer. When Shafilia and the other children had a break on February 18, 2003, Shafilia went to Pakistan with her family for vacation. During their trip to Pakistan, this family also participated in a family wedding ceremony. However, just a few days after this wedding, a major incident occurred with Shafilia. She accidentally drank phenyl flora cleaner. Fennel is commonly used in Asia for cleaning floors and homes. Because fennel is made by mixing some chemicals and soap, drinking it caused severe pain in Shafalia's throat. The reason behind Shafalia drinking fennel was initially said to be because her parents pressured her into an arranged marriage with a Pakistani boy. Because of this pressure, Shafalia drank the fennel, intending to end her life. However, later her parents claimed that someone had poured fennel into an old bottle of water kept in the same bottle usually used for drinking water, and in the darkness of the night, Shafalia mistook fennel for water and drank it. Due to this mistake, Shafalia had to endure a lot of pain. As a result, she was admitted to a hospital in Pakistan. Now, because Shafalia's injury was quite severe, she had to stay in the hospital for a long time. During this time, the holidays of the other family members also ended, so Iftikhar took his 2 children and wife back to Britain, while Shafalia had to stay in Pakistan for treatment. However, shortly after, Iftikhar arranged for Shafalia's return as well, and on May 27, 2003, Shafalia returned to Britain. Straight from the airport, Shafalia was admitted to a hospital for treatment through an ambulance. After several months of treatment, Shafalia's throat healed considerably, and now she rejoined college. Alongside college, she also started a part-time job. But on September 18, 2003, a college teacher noticed that Shafalia Ahmed hadn't been coming to college for the past week. Attempts were made to contact Shafalia via phone, but she could not be reached. When the teacher asked about this to Shafalia's parents, they revealed that Shafalia had not been home for the past week. Their daughter had been missing for a week, and her parents hadn't filed any complaints about her yet, which struck Shafalia's teacher as very strange. Immediately after this, they informed the police. Upon filing the case, a police team arrived at Shafalia's house for investigation, and questioning began with her parents. Shafalia's parents said that they last saw Shafalia at their home on September 11, 2003, and since then, she hadn't been seen. Upon this, the police asked, "When your daughter has been missing for a week, why haven't you filed a complaint with the police yet?" To this, Shafalia's parents responded that this was not the first time Shafalia had been missing from home for a few days. It had happened several times before. To confirm this, when the police checked the records, it was revealed that Shafalia had been missing from home several times in the past. The first time was when Shafalia was only 12 years old. She went missing with her younger sister on March 10, 1998. Because of this, her parents had also filed a missing report for both their daughters with the police. However, at that time, Shafalia returned home with her sister as evening approached. According to records, Shafalia ran away from home for the second time on November 25, 2002. Once again, her father, Iftikhar Ahmed, filed a missing report for his daughter. After extensive searching, Shafalia was found by the police sitting in a park. According to police records, for the third time, Shafalia left home with a friend on February 3, 2003. This time, Shafalia did not return home for 2 days, and then on February 5, 2003, she went to a safe house for orphan people and filed a report against her parents for domestic violence and mental abuse. After the report was filed, the police officer spoke with Shafalia Ahmed and her parents, and after everything was cleared up, Shafalia returned home. After this, on February 18, 2003, Shafalia, along with her 2 sisters and parents, went to Pakistan for a family function and disappeared from there shortly after returning to Britain. Now, looking at old records, the police also suspected that Shafalia Ahmed may have gone somewhere again this time and would return home in a few days. Therefore, the police tried to find Shafalia in all those places where she could have gone. However, even after a few days, the police could not find any trace of Shafalia anywhere. Considering Shafalia's history of running away from home before, the police showed a little laziness in the investigation this time. After this, some local media started making an issue out of the police's laziness. As a result, the demand for a thorough search for Shafalia increased at the local level. Due to the progress in the Shafalia missing case, the police accelerated their investigation. Subsequently, they discovered numerous poems written by Shafalia at her home. These poems revealed her dissatisfaction with her household environment. Her parents wished for Shafalia to lead a traditional Pakistani girl's life, but she favored Western culture. Through her poetry, she expressed this pain. As Shafalia's poems reached the public, the case gained momentum, putting pressure on the police to find her. Consequently, law enforcement intervened, intensifying their search efforts in places Shafalia could have visited. Eventually, CCTV footage confirmed Shafalia's identity to her parents, confirming that the girl in the footage was indeed Shafalia Ahmed. A few days after Shafalia went missing, her parents identified her, made the police believe that at least Shafalia was alive. However, a new turn in the case occurs when the CCTV footage shows Shafalia's class teacher. When the picture is shown to Shafalia's class teacher, they say that the girl in the photo is not Shafalia Ahmed. Some other people also confirm by watching the CCTV footage that the girl in the footage is not Shafalia. Now the police find it very strange that Shafalia's parents themselves did not recognize their daughter from the CCTV footage. The police had many questions in their minds, and to find the answers to those questions, they secretly installed some audio recording devices at Shafalia's home. The police were listening to everything that was happening in Shafalia's house through an audio recording device. According to the recording, one day, Iftikhar is heard saying, in Britain, "If you kill 40 people and there is no evidence against you, then the law here can't do anything to you." Additionally, one day, Iftikhar Ahmad is heard saying, "If the police collect DNA samples from inside the car, what could happen?" Furthermore, the audio recording device captures some suspicious conversations that lead the police to suspect that perhaps Shafalia's father had something to do with his daughter. Now, because the police start to doubt Iftikhar Ahmed, they use his audio recordings as evidence. On December 18, 2003, the police arrest Iftikhar and his wife, Farzana Ahmed, along with 5 other family members, on charges of murdering Shafalia and hiding her body. The police had arrested these people solely on suspicion, hoping that during the investigation, some concrete evidence would be found against these individuals. However, no evidence was found against any of the arrested persons, and eventually, the police released them all. It had been a year since 2004, and there was still no evidence in the case of Shafalia Ahmed. The police were engaged in efforts to locate Shafalia. Meanwhile, floods occurred in the famous Kent River flowing from the Sedgwick area of Britain. When the floods were under control, the body of a girl was found in extremely poor condition on the banks of this river. The distance between the place where the body was found and where Shafalia Ahmed had disappeared was 70 meters, but still, the police had doubts about whether this corpse could be Shafalia. However, to confirm this, DNA samples were collected from the dead body and then matched with the DNA of Iftikhar and Farzana. In this case, a major twist occurs when a body washed away in the flood matches the DNA samples of Iftikhar. This meant that the body washed away from the river was not someone else's but Shafalia's. This finding in the search for Shafalia Ahmed, whom the police had been looking for the past year, now reached the police itself in the form of a corpse. Now the biggest question in front of the police was who and why murdered Shafalia Ahmed. However, even before the statements and actions of the corpse's parents, there were doubts, and in 2003, these 2, along with 5 others, were arrested. Therefore, once again, Shafalia's parents are arrested and questioned. The trial of this case is also ongoing, but even this time, no allegations can be proven against them, which leads the police to release them again. However, after that, the police detain some other suspects and proceed with the investigation against all of them. But despite many efforts, the police cannot reach the murderer. As time passes, people slowly start to forget about Shafalia Ahmed's case. Shafalia disappeared in 2003, and now it was 2010. It had been 7 years since Shafalia's death. By now, Shafalia's family had also moved on from the incident and had become busy with their daily lives. But then, on August 25, 2010, a major theft occurs at Iftikhar Ahmed's house. By now, Iftikhar Ahmed's family had already become the center of attention in the city due to their daughter's disappearance. When a theft occurs in their house, it starts making headlines on the front page of newspapers. This once again puts heavy pressure on the police. Despite working honestly, the police quickly get involved in the search for the thief. After many days of hard work, the police make a revelation that surprises everyone. They arrest not someone else but Iftikhar Ahmed's daughter, Alicia Ahmed, on charges of theft in the house. In fact, Alicia was Shafalia's younger sister. According to Alicia, she didn't get as much money from home, as she demanded and needed. Because of this, she orchestrated the theft of her father's money at her own home. However, while the police solved the theft case very quickly, they spotted an opportunity here. Now, they start talking to Alicia about her sister Shafalia, who disappeared many years ago, and reopened the file related to the Shafalia case. In the initial conversation, the police suspect that Alicia knows something about the disappearance of Shafalia that the world is still unaware of. The police officers try to uncover what happened to Shafalia, but Alicia refuses to cooperate with them. However, the police then tell Alicia, "You have orchestrated a theft in your own house, which could lead to a long prison sentence for you. But if you can provide any information about Shafalia that nobody else knows, your sentence could be significantly reduced." Afterwards, when Alicia reveals some details to the police, everyone is left stunned. Alicia explains, "It was not someone else but my father, Iftikhar, and my mother, Farzana Ahmed, who had beaten Shafalia Ahmad in front of all of us sisters. Then our father put a poly bag over her face, and due to suffocation, she was dead. Then he placed Shafalia's body in his car and threw it into the distant jungle. However, due to the flood, the body drifted to the riverbank from the jungle." According to Alicia, Iftikhar and Farzana did not like their daughter's modern lifestyle at all. On the surface, Shafalia started falling in love with a boy, and when this matter came to light, Iftikhar and Farzana quickly tried to arrange Shafalia's marriage with their preferred boy. When the family goes to Pakistan for a family function, there is an attempt to forcefully marry Shafalia to a boy there, but she refuses to marry. For this reason, she consumes fennel, after which her health deteriorates, and her marriage does not happen either. When Shafalia returns to Britain, her family members insist on arranging her marriage with a boy of their choice. But when Shafalia repeatedly refuses this marriage, her father gets angry. At first, he beats Shafalia in anger and then covers her face with a polybag. Due to suffocation, Shafalia Ahmad dies here. But immediately after this disclosure, Alicia Ahmed becomes a government witness in the case in exchange for being assured a minimum sentence in the theft case. However, based on Alicia's statement, on September 2, 2010, Farzana and Iftikhar are arrested, and then a case of their own daughter's murder is pursued against them. Both of them remain in jail for several months after the arrest. However, nearly a year later, on September 15, 2011, they are granted bail by the Manchester Crown Court. In the further investigation, the police gather some crucial evidence, and based on that evidence, the trial of this case begins in the Chester Crown Court on May 21, 2012. Initially, Farzana and Iftikhar continued to deny their involvement in their daughter's murder. But when Farzana begins to suspect that she is being framed for her own daughter's murder, she finally accepts in court on July 9, 2012, that Shafalia Ahmed's murder was not committed by anyone else but by Iftikhar Ahmed himself. In her statement, Farzana also reveals that she tried to stop Iftikhar, but instead, he beat and threatened her, saying, "If any of you ever talk about this to anyone, your fate will be just like Shafalia's." Now, two witnesses had testified against Iftikhar Ahmed, and besides the police, who gathered evidence, it also indicates that it was Iftikhar Ahmed who murdered Shafalia and then threw her body away. Her body was found far into the jungle. However, a natural disaster struck that area, and with the floodwaters, Shafalia's body drifted and reached the riverbank on its own. After a lengthy trial, in August 2012, Farzana and Iftikhar are found guilty of murdering their own daughter and disposing of her body after the murder. They are then sentenced to 25 years each. It is also proven in court that this was an honor killing. Following this verdict, every year on July 14th, Shafalia Ahmed's birthday, the National Day of Memory for Victims of Honor Killings, is observed in her memory. So, with this, the case of Shafalia Ahmed comes to a close. However, perhaps nature also desired that Shafalia Ahmed receive justice and her killers be punished. Therefore, albeit late, Shafalia's parents, her murderers, are also sentenced.